Welcome to Second Take, the show that takes a look at the issues behind the news. With South Africa having marked 30 years of democracy, Terence Creamer joins me to talk about the highs and lows of the real economy over the period and what could be done to reignite these important sectors. Hi Terence.
Hi Chanel.
How would you describe the performance of the real economy since 1994?
I think the performance has mostly been uneven, but also disappointing over the period. We've had periods of strength, mostly linked to commodity cycles, up cycles or super cycles. But even there, we missed some of those. We didn't invest in the infrastructure in time to really take advantage of those super cycles that came quite soon after the democracy came into South Africa. And we also had a focus on a redistribution in the mining sector. That was important at the time, but I suppose when you're doing a lot of corporate activity, that meant that we weren't really focusing on, growing the sector at in an alignment to what was going on, say, for instance, in China. For instance, our competitor mining economies such as Australia really hitched their wagon to that boom in China, so we sort of missed those. And then, more recently, it's been a real difficult period. The manufacturing economy, its contribution to gross domestic product has shrunk massively from about over 20% to around 12% currently. That's a relative contribution, but it really hasn't punched its weight, and it's really struggled to adapt to the sort of more competitive environment that we entered in post-1994. And our industrial policies haven't really been very effective. Initially not really having one, and then more recently not really being very effective. And then, agriculture has been up and down as well. And really the signal of how poor it has been more recently, I suppose, is the construction sector, which is a major input into the real economy. And that has all but collapsed in South Africa, with only one major construction company still listed, a general construction company still listed on the JSE, the others having become much more niche and focused or have really set up elsewhere.
What are some of the external factors that have influenced the performance of these sectors?
As we integrated into the world was globalizing and liberalizing, and that was the big mega trend. And I think that was really difficult as we integrated during trade liberalization. Our manufacturing sectors that had been built, some of them behind quite hefty barriers, really struggled to find their feet post that, and some have been able to do that and have been successful in exporting into the world economy, but many haven't. So that was a sort of a mega trend that we've partially navigated, but and we are an open trading economy, but haven't fully navigated, particularly on the manufacturing front, and have underperformed really, I think, in mining and agriculture there with the openness. I think agriculture could have been a major boon to rural development and job creation in rural areas, and because of there were a number of factors that affected that, but internally looking at around the security of land tenure, etc., that made farming or investment in farming, it was a weight around that. And then of course mining, I think the lack of infrastructure has been a major theme, but there's also been the global financial crisis that came in 2009, 2009. That really, we've never seriously recovered from that. We just haven't grown since that, and that's more than 10 years ago. And so that's been a major external factor. And then more recently, obviously the COVID lockdowns had a major deleterious effect on our real economy.
There have also been some major own goals.
Yeah, the major own goals, initially I think not gearing up for the commodity super cycles that came and getting our rail infrastructure in particular in place to take advantage of that. But more recently, load shedding is the biggest own goal that we've scored against ourselves over the last decade and a bit. And that has really crimped investment and really undermined the real economy generally. All businesses have been badly affected. But, companies that manufacture, that mine, and also that farm really need stable electricity supply. So that's been a major problem. And then obviously the state capture era crisis, which really hollowed out key state-owned enterprises and really made them non-fit for purpose in terms of what the real economy needed and to attract investment. And those are still in repair mode, really. And that's been a real major impact on investment. And we've seen this lack of growth and job creation now for over a decade. Really, it's very much linked to that own goal of state capture, which we haven't really extricated ourselves from. So that has been a big problem. And then more recently, visibly, as the freight logistics crisis is a real problem for the real economy. And that, again, is going to require some years to get ourselves out of. And now we see the looming water crisis in a number of areas. And that will really, together with load shedding, freight logistics, this one could really hit business hard, obviously society hard, but could also hit the real economy that needs these basic building blocks. It needs stable power supply, it needs stable water and potable water supply, and it needs freight logistics system that works. Fortunately, the road system, which is really in private hands, has sort of closed the gap somewhat in the freight side, but it's not enough, and we really need our ports and our railways to be working much more efficiently. So those have been, I think, in the last decade, what post the global financial crisis, it's really been about these own goals that have led to very low levels of investment in the real economy and sort of bad outcomes.
What could be done to reignite manufacturing in particular?
Yeah, I think one opportunity that looks near term is that we know that we're going to be entering this massive energy transition. The world is in it, and South Africa is at the start of it. So we're going to be investing heavily in wind and solar in particular in South Africa. Those are the cheapest forms of new electricity that are going to come into the system. Obviously, that has to be balanced in some ways with electricity that can be used very quickly to fill the gaps when the wind is not blowing and the sun is not shining. So there's obviously going to also be a big battery rollout. We have pumped storage schemes in place, but really around the wind and solar, there's a big manufacturing potential because that also requires grid infrastructure. So we need to be putting in much more transmission and distribution grid. So those sort of three levers of wind component, solar component, and grid component, wires, towers, substations, those are key manufacturing areas that should be on a multi-decade growth trajectory. It's been stop-start, and that's been one of the own goals that linked to the load shedding crisis, is that we haven't had this consistent spend, but we now, necessity is the mother of invention. We have to actually invest in these new electricity infrastructure to stay in business, to keep the economy going. So there should be a sort of a multi-decade horizon around which we can build manufacturing. And then obviously, once you look at that energy transition and really link ourselves to the decarbonisation agenda that's happening globally, there are other manufacturing opportunities that can arise. So we'll see, obviously, in the mobility space, the electric vehicles, and we are trying to realign automotive manufacturing industry, which has been the one bright spot in the manufacturing sector. It has remained with a lot of support from government, and I think there is going to need also in this transition space some support from government. But there's definitely opportunity in electric mobility. And then, if you build wind and solar at the sort of scale that we're talking about or need to do, and you build a little bit more, you're going to have times of the day where you're going to have really zero cost or zero marginal cost electricity. And that creates a huge opportunity in a country which has the three components of land, wind and sun, to become a leader in the green hydrogen space. Now we know that green hydrogen is not a very easily exportable product at the moment. So you need to find ways to put that into some sort of form that can be exported. Obviously, you can use it in your mines and in your own system to decarbonize the hard-to-abate sectors in your own economy, and that's going to be important. But I think South Africa has the ingredients to also become a superpower in green hydrogen. And really, the way we would export that is in the form of some sort of derivative product, because it's not easy to export. So a lot of the initial products are going to be around green ammonia. But I think there's also opportunity to create green direct reduced iron. And we have an advantage here in the sense that we've got a mothballed Saldanha steel that it can be reignited through using green hydrogen instead of coking coal to produce a DRI that can be used in mills all over the world that have got electric arc furnace mills that are looking for that sort of ingredient that is green. And then, we've also got this installed base at Sasol where we could, instead of using the grey the grey hydrogen that we currently produce from coal, is to transition towards a green hydrogen to be used in its process, Fischer-Tropsch processes, to produce green fuels and chemicals. And the obvious immediate example would be sustainable aviation fuels, where there's immediate demand and there's a readiness to pay a price premium, especially in Europe. So I think those sort of areas, that's just one, And if we look at, doing the same in, the freight logistics area and in agriculture, mining, if we link ourselves to the greener transition, critical minerals are going to be in demand. We have some of those. We've got a mining heritage, and we could build a fairly large critical minerals base in South and Southern Africa and build our logistics and our energy around that. So I think there's a big opportunity to really hitch our wagon to this decarbonisation agenda, and then that gives you a sort of a multi-decade horizon for big manufacturing investments, probably with initial some support from government in the form of incentives, but those should wash out of the system as we become more competitive. So there is, I think, an opportunity to reignite our manufacturing economy around the green energy transition, which is also called the just energy transition, where you can create more jobs and new livelihoods and new enterprises if we play our cards right in this area.
Thank you. That's the Second Take show for this week. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time for more news analysis. Also, don't forget to listen to the audio version of our Engineering News Daily email newsletter.